The evening rush always arrived before she was ready for it. Plates clattered, chairs scraped across the floor, and conversations blended into one endless wave of noise that filled the restaurant every night. She moved quickly between tables, balancing heavy trays while forcing polite smiles that had long become part of her routine. Most customers never noticed her face. To them, she was simply the person who refilled water glasses and asked if everything tasted fine. Her shift usually began before sunset and ended long after the streets outside had gone quiet. By the time she tied her apron each day, her feet already remembered the pain waiting for them. Still, she showed up on time, hair neatly tied back, trying her best to look energetic even when sleep had barely visited her the night before. The restaurant stood on a busy corner where people came to escape their own tiring days. Couples celebrated birthdays, office workers laughed loudly after long meetings, and tourists snapped photos of meals they would forget within hours. She watched all of it happen while remaining invisible inside the movement of service. Sometimes she wondered how many lives passed in front of her every week. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Stories she would never know. Dreams she would never hear about. People arrived excited, sad, hopeful, or stressed, and left satisfied or disappointed. Meanwhile, her own life stayed almost exactly the same. She lived in a small rented room above an old grocery shop a few streets away. The walls were thin enough for her to hear neighbors arguing or televisions playing late into the night. The room held only what she truly needed: a narrow bed, a small table, a chair near the window, and a kettle that worked only when it wanted to. It wasn't much, but it was affordable, and affordability mattered more than comfort. Every morning followed the same pattern. Wake up early, prepare something simple to eat, check her phone for missed messages that rarely came, and leave for work. She walked the same path daily, passing the same closed storefronts and street vendors preparing for business. Life felt like a loop she couldn't step out of. Yet there was something she never told anyone at work. Whenever she passed a music shop on her way to the restaurant, her steps slowed without her realizing it. Behind the glass window stood instruments shining under warm lights, guitars hanging neatly, violins resting carefully, and in the corner, a piano. Its surface reflected the street outside like calm water. She never went inside. Instead, she paused for just a moment, pretending to check her phone while secretly staring at the keys. Something deep inside her chest stirred every time she looked at it. A quiet feeling, both comforting and painful, like remembering a place she once belonged to but could no longer reach. Then she would shake the thought away and continue walking. Work was waiting, and dreams did not pay rent. At the restaurant, the manager often reminded staff to move faster during busy hours. Efficiency mattered more than conversation. Tips depended on speed and friendliness, so she learned to hide exhaustion behind practiced kindness. She memorized regular customers' preferences, laughed politely at jokes she had heard many times before, and apologized even when mistakes were not hers. One night, while clearing a table, she noticed a child tapping invisible piano keys on the surface of the table. The child hummed softly, completely lost in imagination. His parents barely noticed, busy discussing work matters. She paused longer than necessary, watching his fingers move. For a brief second, the noise around her faded. Her own hands twitched slightly, as if remembering something old, something familiar. She quickly picked up the empty plates and walked away before anyone noticed the strange expression on her face. Memories were dangerous. They slowed her down. During short breaks, other waiters scrolled through social media or complained about customers. She usually sat quietly, sipping water and resting her aching feet. Sometimes laughter surrounded her, but she felt separate from it, as though standing behind invisible glass. It wasn't loneliness exactly. It was more like unfinished conversation with life itself. Late at night, after closing time, the restaurant changed completely. Lights dimmed, chairs turned upside down on tables, and silence finally replaced chaos. Those moments were her favorite. She cleaned slowly, enjoying the calm that followed hours of movement. In one corner of the dining area stood an old piano. It was mostly decorative, placed there years ago to create atmosphere. Customers occasionally took photos beside it, but no one played it anymore. A thin layer of dust often settled across its surface despite regular cleaning. She avoided looking at it directly. Still, sometimes while wiping nearby tables, her eyes drifted toward the instrument. The keys remained closed beneath its lid, quiet and patient, as if waiting for someone who never arrived. One evening, curiosity overcame caution. She brushed dust from the top while cleaning, her fingers moving gently across the polished wood. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. Without thinking, she lifted the lid slightly. The white and black keys appeared untouched, perfectly aligned. Her hand hovered above them, but footsteps echoed from the kitchen, and she quickly shut the lid, heart beating faster than it should have. She returned to work, embarrassed by something she could not explain. On her walk home that night, the city felt unusually quiet. Streetlights reflected on wet pavement after a light rain. She replayed the moment again and again, the feeling of almost touching the keys. Almost. She told herself it meant nothing. Life had moved on long ago. People grew up. Responsibilities replaced hobbies. That was normal. That was adulthood. Yet sleep came slowly. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to distant traffic. Memories slipped in despite her efforts. Sounds of music filling a small room years ago. Laughter, encouragement, and the feeling of creating something beautiful without fear of failure. Back then, time passed differently. Hours disappeared without exhaustion. Now every minute felt heavy. The alarm rang too soon the next morning, pulling her back into reality. Another shift waited. Another crowd. Another day repeating the last. Still, something had changed, even if she refused to admit it. Throughout the day, small details caught her attention. The rhythm of spoons against cups, the steady beat of footsteps across tiles, the melody hidden inside ordinary noise. She found herself noticing patterns everywhere, like music quietly existing beneath daily life. While serving dinner, she accidentally hummed under her breath. A coworker teased her, asking if she was in a good mood. She laughed it off, surprised by herself. Good mood felt unfamiliar. As evening approached, customers filled the restaurant again. Conversations grew louder, orders piled up, and stress returned. She moved quickly, but inside, her thoughts drifted elsewhere, toward forgotten sounds and possibilities she had long buried. She didn't know why these feelings returned now after so many years. Nothing in her life had changed. She was still the same waitress carrying trays between tables. But deep inside, something restless had awakened. Near closing time, she passed the piano again. The dining hall was nearly empty, lights soft and golden. For a moment, she stopped walking. No one was watching. Her reflection appeared faintly on the polished surface. She studied it. Tired eyes, careful smile. Someone older than her years but still searching for something unnamed. Her fingers curled slightly at her side. Then the manager called her name from across the room, breaking the moment. She turned immediately and hurried away, leaving the piano untouched once more. Outside, the night air felt cool against her face as she locked the restaurant door behind her. Cars passed, strangers walked by, and the city continued without noticing her quiet struggle. She began the familiar walk home, unaware that life sometimes changes not through grand plans, but through small moments that refuse to disappear from the heart. She believed tomorrow would be the same as today. She had no idea that a single unexpected evening was slowly approaching, one that would ask her to face the part of herself she had spent years trying to forget. The next few days passed exactly as expected, yet something inside her refused to settle back into normal life. She continued serving tables, memorizing orders, and moving through crowded evenings, but her thoughts often wandered somewhere else. It happened without warning. A sound, a rhythm, or even silence could suddenly pull her attention away from the present moment. She noticed it most during quiet mornings before work. The city woke slowly outside her window while sunlight slipped through thin curtains. Usually, mornings felt rushed, filled with preparation and worry about being late. But now she sometimes sat still for a few extra minutes, listening carefully to the world around her. The ticking clock sounded like a steady beat. A passing motorcycle created a low hum. Even birds outside formed patterns in their calls. Ordinary noise began to feel meaningful, almost organized, as if life itself carried hidden music. She didn't understand why these feelings had returned after so many years. For a long time, she had trained herself not to think about the past. Remembering only made things harder. Dreams were easier to forget than to explain why they never came true. But memories have strange timing. Once they begin to return, they rarely stop halfway. One afternoon, while organizing utensils at the restaurant, she overheard two customers discussing a music concert happening nearby. They spoke excitedly about live instruments, talented performers, and the feeling of hearing music played right in front of you. She tried not to listen, but every word reached her anyway. Without realizing it, she slowed her work just to hear more. A sudden image appeared in her mind. Smaller hands pressing piano keys, laughter filling a modest home, someone patiently correcting mistakes while encouraging her to try again. The memory felt warm but fragile, like something that could disappear if touched too roughly. She blinked and forced herself back into the present. Orders needed delivering. Tables needed cleaning. Reality did not wait for nostalgia. Still, that evening felt heavier than usual. When the rush hour ended and customers began leaving, she found herself drawn again toward the quiet corner where the old piano stood. The restaurant lights reflected softly across its surface. She told herself she was only checking if it needed cleaning. Her hand rested on the lid longer this time. The wood felt cool beneath her fingers. Familiar, almost welcoming. She glanced around. The kitchen staff were busy closing for the night. No one paid attention to her. Slowly, carefully, she lifted the lid again. The keys waited silently. Her heart beat faster, though she wasn't sure why. It was only an instrument, nothing more. Yet standing there felt like opening a door she had locked years ago. She pressed one key very gently. A soft note filled the empty restaurant. The sound surprised her. It wasn't loud, but it carried emotion she hadn't prepared for. The vibration traveled through her hand, straight into memories she thought were gone forever. She quickly pulled her hand back. For several seconds, she simply stood there breathing, afraid someone might have heard. But no one came. The restaurant remained calm. Curiosity overcame fear. She pressed another key, then another. The notes didn't form music yet, just scattered sounds searching for direction. Her fingers felt stiff, uncertain, like strangers trying to remember an old language. Still, something inside her relaxed with every touch. She stopped suddenly when laughter echoed from the kitchen. Panic returned, and she closed the lid again, stepping away as if she had done something forbidden. All the way home, her hands felt different, alive. That night, sleep brought memories she hadn't visited in years. She remembered living in a smaller town far from the busy city. Life had been simpler then. Money was always limited, but the home felt full of warmth. Evenings often ended with music drifting through rooms while worries waited outside the door. Back then, learning piano had not felt like effort. It was joy. Hours disappeared while practicing melodies again and again, chasing perfection not because anyone demanded it, but because playing felt natural. Neighbors sometimes gathered just to listen. Encouraging smiles made her believe possibilities were endless. But life changed suddenly. Financial struggles arrived quietly at first, then all at once. Bills stacked higher. Stress replaced laughter. Practical decisions had to be made, and music slowly became something unnecessary. The piano was sold. She still remembered the day it was carried out of the house. The empty space it left behind felt larger than the instrument itself. After that, practice stopped. Responsibilities grew. Education, work, survival, these became priorities. Music faded into memory. Years passed before she even realized how completely it had disappeared from her life. When she woke the next morning, her pillow was slightly damp from tears she didn't remember shedding. She sat upright, confused by how strongly the past still affected her. She told herself again that those days were over. People moved forward. That was how life worked. Yet during her shift later that evening, she caught herself glancing repeatedly toward the piano. Felt impossible to ignore now, like unfinished business waiting patiently. A coworker noticed her distraction and joked that she looked lost in thought. She laughed it off, blaming tiredness. Explaining the truth felt impossible. How could she describe missing something she had convinced herself she no longer needed? As days passed, she began staying a few minutes longer after closing time. At first, she only stood near the piano. Then she started pressing a few keys each night when no one watched. The sounds slowly connected. Simple patterns returned. Familiar movements awakened within her fingers. Mistakes happened often, but instead of frustration, she felt excitement. Something rare in her routine life. Each note reminded her that a part of herself still existed beneath years of exhaustion. One night, she accidentally played a short melody she recognized instantly. The realization made her laugh softly in disbelief. She hadn't thought about that tune in nearly a decade. Yet her hands remembered. It felt like meeting an old friend who never truly left. Outside the restaurant, life continued unchanged. Bills still needed paying. Work remained demanding. Nothing about her situation improved overnight. But internally, something important shifted. She began walking differently, slightly lighter, slightly more hopeful. Even long shifts felt less overwhelming because she carried a quiet secret with her. After everyone left, there would be music. Sometimes she worried she was being foolish. After all, playing alone in an empty restaurant changed nothing about reality. No audience waited. No future plan existed. Still, those few stolen minutes became the best part of her day. Late one evening, while she practiced softly, she didn't notice someone entering briefly to collect forgotten belongings. The person paused near the door, listening quietly before leaving again without interruption. She remained unaware that anyone had heard her. When she finally stopped playing, silence filled the room again. But this time it felt peaceful rather than lonely. As she locked up and stepped outside, she realized something surprising. For the first time in years, she was looking forward to tomorrow. She didn't know where this renewed connection would lead. Maybe nowhere. Maybe it would remain only a private comfort after long working hours. But deep down, she sensed that rediscovering music was not happening by accident. Life, which had felt frozen for so long, seemed to be gently moving again, preparing her for something she could not yet see. And somewhere ahead, an ordinary evening was waiting to turn into an extraordinary moment. The restaurant felt different that evening, though at first she could not explain why. From the moment she arrived, there was unusual energy in the air. Staff moved faster than usual, decorations were being adjusted, and the manager checked the dining area again and again as if preparing for something important. She tied her apron and asked a coworker what was happening. "Special dinner event," came the reply. "Some guests booked the place weeks ago. Live music tonight too." Live music. The words stayed with her longer than expected. She glanced toward the familiar corner of the restaurant where the old piano stood. For once, it had been cleaned carefully. Fresh flowers sat nearby, and a small spotlight pointed toward it. The instrument no longer looked forgotten. It looked important. Her chest tightened slightly. Throughout the evening, reservations filled every table. Well-dressed guests arrived early, conversations louder and more cheerful than usual. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and the kitchen worked at full speed. She focused on her tasks, reminding herself that tonight was just another busy shift. Still, she found herself stealing quick looks at the piano whenever she passed by. Around sunset, the manager gathered the staff briefly. "The pianist will arrive soon," he announced. "Everything needs to run smoothly tonight." She nodded along with everyone else and returned to work, but an unexpected nervousness settled inside her. She wasn't performing. She had no role in the music. Yet knowing someone would play that piano in front of everyone made her strangely restless. As guests continued arriving, she imagined what it would feel like to sit there openly, without hiding, letting music fill the room instead of quietly touching keys after closing time. The thought felt impossible. Hours passed, and still the pianist had not arrived. At first, no one worried. Traffic delays were common in the city. But as dinner service began and the piano remained silent, tension slowly grew. The manager checked his phone repeatedly, stepping outside several times to make calls. Whispers spread among staff. Finally, frustration showed on his face as he returned inside. "The performer canceled," he said quietly to the supervisor. "Emergency situation." The news moved quickly through the team. Guests had expected live music. The setup was ready. The schedule depended on it. Without entertainment, the carefully planned evening felt incomplete. The manager paced near the entrance, clearly stressed. Some customers had already begun asking when the performance would start. She continued serving food, pretending not to listen, but her heartbeat quickened. The silent piano seemed louder than ever. One of her co-workers suddenly spoke up while clearing plates. "Didn't you say you knew how to play?" She froze. The comment was casual, almost joking, but it landed heavily. A few days earlier, during a late-night cleanup, she had mentioned playing long ago without thinking much about it. Now several co-workers looked at her with curiosity. She shook her head quickly. "Not really. It's been years." But the idea had already taken life. Another staff member called the manager over. Within moments, attention shifted toward her completely. She felt heat rise to her face as questions came one after another. "You can play. Just something simple? It's better than silence." The manager studied her carefully. He looked desperate, caught between maintaining professionalism and solving an unexpected problem. "Can you help us tonight?" he asked gently. Her mind raced. Play? Now? In front of a full restaurant? The thought terrified her. Playing alone after closing time felt safe because no one watched. No expectations existed. But performing publicly was different. People would listen, judge, notice mistakes. She imagined her hands trembling, notes collapsing into chaos, customers staring in disappointment. "I don't think I can," she whispered. The manager nodded understandingly but looked around helplessly. Guests were growing impatient. The atmosphere slowly lost excitement. For several minutes, she continued working, trying to ignore the conversation. Yet every step toward the kitchen felt heavier. Something inside her refused to stay quiet. She remembered the nights spent rediscovering music. The joy she felt when melodies returned. The feeling of being alive again, even briefly. What was the point of rediscovering something meaningful if fear stopped her now? Her hands trembled slightly as she placed dishes on a table. A guest nearby joked loudly about the missing musician. Laughter followed, but it sounded uncomfortable. Without fully deciding, she walked toward the manager. "I can try," she said softly. Even as the words left her mouth, doubt rushed in. The manager's relief was immediate. "Just play something calm," he said. "Background music is enough." Background music. That sounded safer. Still, as she approached the piano, every sound in the restaurant seemed louder. Footsteps, conversations, clinking glasses. She became painfully aware of dozens of people nearby. Her coworkers offered encouraging smiles as she passed. She sat down slowly on the bench. For a moment, she simply stared at the keys. Under the warm spotlight, her reflection appeared faintly on the polished surface. Her breathing felt uneven. She considered standing up and walking away. No one would blame her. But then she placed her hands on the keys. The familiar cool touch grounded her instantly. She closed her eyes. The first note came quietly, then another. Her fingers moved cautiously at first, searching for confidence. The restaurant noise continued for several seconds, conversations unaffected. But gradually something changed. Muscle memory awakened stronger than before. Notes connected naturally. The melody grew smoother, warmer. Her fear slowly faded as attention shifted from the audience to the music itself. She forgot where she was. She forgot the crowd. All that remained was sound flowing through her hands. One table grew quiet, then another. Conversations softened as guests began noticing the unexpected performance. Heads turned toward the piano. Forks paused midair. The music carried emotion that could not be rehearsed, years of silence, longing, struggle, and rediscovery blending into every note. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply playing. Confidence replaced hesitation. Her posture relaxed, and the melody deepened. Each transition felt natural, guided by feeling rather than perfection. Soon, the restaurant fell almost completely silent. Even the kitchen staff peeked out to watch. She remained unaware of the growing attention. Her eyes stayed closed, completely absorbed in the moment she had once believed was lost forever. A guest near the back quietly lifted a phone, recording. Another followed, but she noticed none of it. For the first time in years, she felt exactly where she belonged. When the final notes faded, silence lingered for a heartbeat longer than expected. Then applause filled the room. She opened her eyes suddenly, startled. Dozens of people were looking directly at her. The sound of clapping surrounded her from every direction. Some guests stood. Others smiled warmly. The reaction felt unreal, overwhelming. Her face flushed as she quickly stood up, unsure what to do next. The manager approached, visibly amazed. "That was incredible," he said. She shook her head shyly, almost embarrassed by the attention. "I just remembered a little," she replied. But inside, something powerful shifted. Fear had not disappeared, yet it no longer controlled her. As she returned to her duties, guests stopped her repeatedly to compliment the performance. Simple words like beautiful and moving followed her across the dining hall. She thanked them politely, still trying to process what had happened. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Unbeknownst to her, the recordings captured that night were already beginning a journey far beyond the restaurant walls. And while she believed she had only helped save an awkward situation, the truth was much bigger. That single decision, saying yes instead of no, had quietly opened a door that would soon change everything. The applause slowly faded, but the feeling it left behind stayed with her long after the sound disappeared. She returned to serving tables, yet everything felt slightly unreal, as if she were moving through someone else's evening instead of her own. Customers smiled at her differently now. Some nodded with quiet admiration when she passed by. Others stopped her just to say how much they enjoyed the music. One elderly guest gently held her hand and said the performance reminded him of memories from many years ago. She thanked everyone politely, unsure how to respond. Compliments made her uncomfortable. She kept thinking they were exaggerating. After all, she had only played what she remembered. Nothing professional. Nothing planned. Still, something warm settled inside her chest. For years, she had moved through life unnoticed. That night, people truly saw her, not as a waitress carrying plates, but as someone capable of creating something meaningful. When the restaurant finally closed, exhaustion mixed with excitement. The staff gathered briefly before leaving, replaying the evening again and again. "I didn't know you could play like that," one coworker said. "You saved the whole event," another added. She laughed nervously, brushing off the praise. Deep down, she still felt like the same person who hesitated before touching the keys just hours earlier. The manager approached her before she left. "You should play again sometime," he said sincerely. Customers loved it. She nodded politely but didn't answer. The idea felt too big to consider yet. Outside, cool night air greeted her as she stepped onto the street. The city lights shimmered across passing cars, and distant voices echoed through nearby shops closing for the night. Usually, after long shifts, she walked home thinking only about rest. But tonight her mind replayed every moment at the piano. The first note, the silence that followed, the applause. Her hands still tingled slightly. For the first time in years, she smiled during the walk home without forcing it. Back in her small room, she sat on the edge of the bed, too awake to sleep. The quiet space felt different now, almost too small to contain the emotions she carried. She wondered what would have happened if she had refused earlier. The thought made her uneasy. Sometimes life offered chances only once. She realized how close she had come to letting fear win again. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the table. A message from a coworker appeared. Someone posted your performance online. She stared at the screen, confused. Online, she opened the message link hesitantly. A short video began playing. There she was, sitting at the piano under warm restaurant lights, completely unaware of being recorded. Seeing herself from outside felt strange. She noticed details she hadn't felt during the moment. The calm expression on her face, the confidence in her posture, the way her hands moved naturally across the keys. The video ended with applause. Below it, comments were already appearing. People wrote things like, "So emotional," "This gave me chills," and "Real talent." Her heart raced. She refreshed the page again. More views appeared. More comments followed. It felt impossible that strangers were watching something so personal. She set the phone down, overwhelmed. Part of her felt proud. Another part felt exposed. Music had always been private, connected to memories and emotions she rarely shared. Now it existed publicly beyond her control. Sleep came late that night. The next morning, her phone buzzed nonstop. Notifications continued appearing. Messages from coworkers, unfamiliar accounts, and even distant acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years. The video had spread faster than she expected. Someone had shared it again. Then another person reposted it. Views climbed into thousands within hours. She sat quietly, staring at the numbers, unsure how to react. Nothing about her surroundings changed. The same small room, the same unpaid bills on the table, the same uniform waiting for her next shift. Yet outside her personal world, something unusual was happening. At work that evening, several customers recognized her immediately. "You're the pianist from the video," one guest said excitedly. She froze, surprised. Word had traveled quickly. Some visitors even requested seating near the piano, hoping she might play again. The manager looked both shocked and delighted by the unexpected attention. Business felt livelier than usual. Conversations about the performance filled the dining hall. He approached her during a quiet moment. "If you're comfortable," he said carefully, "maybe you could play again tonight?" Her stomach tightened. Last night had happened naturally, without expectation. Now people were waiting. Expecting something special felt far more intimidating. But she remembered the feeling of playing, the peace it brought. After a moment of hesitation, she agreed. Later that evening, she sat at the piano again. This time she noticed phones already pointed in her direction. Nervousness returned briefly, but once the music began, familiar calm followed. The room softened once more. She realized something important while playing. Music connected people in ways words never could. Conversations paused. Strangers shared the same emotional space without speaking. When she finished, applause returned louder than before. And somewhere among the guests sat a quiet listener who paid closer attention than anyone else. The person didn't record or clap immediately. Instead, they watched thoughtfully, observing not just skill but emotion, the honesty behind every note. After the performance, while she resumed her duties, that guest spoke briefly with the manager before leaving. She noticed none of it. Days passed, and the video continued gaining attention online. Messages arrived from people sharing how the performance comforted them during difficult times. Some wrote about rediscovering their own forgotten passions after watching her play. Reading those stories affected her deeply. She had never imagined her music could matter to strangers. Yet alongside excitement came uncertainty. What did this sudden attention mean? Was it temporary? Would people forget within days? She reminded herself not to expect too much. Life had disappointed her before. Still, something inside urged her to keep playing. Each night she practiced longer after closing, improving slowly, reconnecting with skills buried for years. Confidence grew quietly. One evening, as she prepared to leave work, the manager called her back. "There's someone asking about you," he said. Her first thought was concern. Had she made a mistake with an order? Was there a complaint? Instead, she saw a neatly dressed visitor waiting near the entrance, holding a calm but curious expression. The conversation that followed was brief but unexpected. The visitor introduced themselves politely and mentioned seeing the online video earlier that week. They spoke about music, not casually but with understanding. Before leaving, they handed her a card. "If you ever consider performing seriously," they said, "you should contact me." She stood frozen after they walked away. The card felt unusually heavy in her hand. Back home, she placed it on the table and stared at it for a long time. Doubt immediately followed excitement. Opportunities sounded wonderful in theory, but change required courage. And courage meant risk. She didn't know whether this moment marked the beginning of something real or just another passing experience. But one truth became clear as she lay awake that night. The life she once believed fixed and predictable was slowly shifting. What started as a simple attempt to help during a canceled performance had turned into something far greater. Something reaching beyond the restaurant, beyond routine, beyond fear. And for the first time, the future no longer looked like a straight road repeating the past. It looked open, uncertain, and full of possibility. The small card remained on her table for days. She moved it from one place to another without realizing it. Beside her phone, near the kettle, then back again beside the window. Each time she looked at it, the same question returned. Was this real or just temporary excitement? Life outside continued as usual. She still woke early, wore the same uniform, and hurried through crowded dinner shifts. Customers still ordered meals, bills still waited to be paid, and exhaustion still followed long working hours. Yet everything felt slightly different now. People recognized her more often. Some visitors came specifically hoping to hear her play. A few even asked for photos after her performances, something that made her laugh nervously every time. She never imagined attention could feel both exciting and uncomfortable at once. At night, after closing, she practiced longer than before. Mistakes frustrated her less now. Instead of fear, she felt determination growing quietly inside. She searched for melodies she once loved, rebuilding skills piece by piece. Still, doubt followed closely behind hope. What if the attention disappeared tomorrow? What if she wasn't truly good enough? Those thoughts visited her often, especially during quiet moments when confidence faded and reality returned. One evening after work, she finally picked up the card again. Her hands hesitated before dialing the number written on it. She almost ended the call before it connected. But a calm voice answered. The conversation was simple at first. The person explained they worked with live performers and small music events across the city. They had seen many musicians, but something about her performance felt honest, emotional rather than rehearsed. They invited her to visit a small studio for an informal meeting. No pressure, they said. Just come and talk. After ending the call, she sat silently for several minutes. Agreeing felt frightening. Saying yes meant stepping outside the safe routine she understood. For years, survival depended on stability, not risk. Still, curiosity won. On her day off, she traveled across the city to the address provided. The building looked ordinary from outside, nothing grand or intimidating. Inside, soft music echoed through hallways lined with instruments and recording equipment. Her nervousness returned instantly. She felt out of place among people who clearly belonged to the world of music. Some discussed performances confidently, others practiced without hesitation. She almost turned back, but the same calm person from the restaurant greeted her warmly, easing some of her anxiety. They spoke about opportunities, small performances, local gatherings, background music events where audiences listened closely. Nothing unrealistic, nothing rushed, just a chance. They asked if she would like to play something. Her heart pounded as she sat before another piano, unfamiliar yet inviting. Unlike the restaurant, this room was quiet, built entirely for sound. She began slowly. At first, nerves affected her timing, but soon the music steadied. She focused only on feeling rather than perfection. When she finished, silence filled the room. The listener smiled. "You don't just play notes," they said gently. "You tell stories." Those words stayed with her long after she left. Over the next week, she faced a difficult decision. Accepting performance opportunities meant adjusting work hours. It meant uncertainty with income. It meant trusting something she had once lost. Practical worries filled her mind. Rent needed paying. Stability mattered. Dreams alone could not guarantee security. One evening, while serving dinner, she watched customers laughing freely, celebrating moments that mattered to them. Suddenly she realized how many years she had postponed her own happiness while waiting for the perfect time. Perfect time never came. Later that night, she spoke with the manager privately. Her voice trembled as she explained the situation. Possible performances, changing schedules, uncertainty. To her surprise, he listened patiently. "You've worked hard here," he said. "If music gives you a chance, you should try." His support lifted a weight she didn't know she carried. Gradually, she reduced a few shifts each week and began accepting small music events. The first performance outside the restaurant felt terrifying. The audience sat close, listening carefully, leaving no place to hide mistakes. Her hands shook before starting. But once again, music guided her forward. Applause followed, not overwhelming, but sincere. People approached afterward to share how peaceful the performance felt. Each event built confidence slowly. Still, balancing two lives proved exhausting. Some mornings she questioned whether she was doing the right thing. Traveling between work and performances left little time for rest. There were nights when audiences were small. Moments when she felt invisible again. Not every performance received attention online. Not every effort felt successful. Reality reminded her that progress was rarely smooth. Yet something important had changed. She no longer measured success only through recognition. Playing itself became enough reason to continue. Meanwhile, the original video from the restaurant continued circulating online. Messages arrived from people across different places, sharing encouragement and personal stories inspired by her journey. One message affected her deeply. A young viewer wrote that watching her rediscover music encouraged them to return to painting after years of self-doubt. She read the message several times. For so long, she believed her dreams had little value. Now she realized that courage could quietly influence others without intention. Weeks later, she received an invitation to perform at a larger event. Her biggest audience yet. The opportunity felt exciting but overwhelming. Fear returned strongly. What if she failed in front of so many people? That evening, she walked past the restaurant after finishing rehearsal. Through the window, she saw new staff moving between tables, life continuing exactly as before. She remembered who she had been not long ago. Tired, invisible, convinced nothing would change. Standing there, she understood something clearly. Transformation had not happened in one dramatic moment. It happened through small decisions repeated again and again. Touching the piano, saying yes, trying despite fear. Back home, she practiced late into the night. Not to impress anyone, but to honor the journey that brought her here. Sleep came peacefully. For the first time, uncertainty no longer felt like danger. Felt like growth. She didn't know where this path would lead. Success was never guaranteed. Challenges would surely come. But she also knew one truth with certainty now. She was no longer running away from the part of herself she once abandoned. And very soon, one performance would bring everything together. Past struggles, present courage, and a future she had only begun to imagine. The day of the large performance arrived faster than she expected. All morning, a quiet, nervous energy followed her everywhere. Even simple tasks felt heavier than usual. She tried distracting herself by cleaning her room, organizing small things, and practicing short melodies. But her thoughts kept returning to the evening ahead. This performance was different. Until now, most audiences had discovered her by chance. Restaurant guests, small gatherings, or people who came with curiosity after seeing her online video. But tonight, people were attending specifically to hear her play. Tickets had been sold. Her name appeared on promotional posters. The idea still felt unreal. She stood near the window for a long time before leaving, watching people move through the streets below. Everyone seemed busy with their own lives, unaware of how important this day felt to her. Not long ago, she had walked those same streets worrying only about finishing another exhausting shift. Life then felt predictable, almost locked in place. Now everything felt open, yet uncertain. At the venue, Soft lights illuminated a modest stage with a grand piano placed at its center. Rows of seats slowly filled as guests arrived, chatting quietly while waiting for the program to begin. Seeing the crowd made her heartbeat quicken. For a moment, doubt returned stronger than ever. What if she disappointed them? What if the music that felt so natural alone suddenly failed under pressure? She stepped backstage and closed her eyes briefly. Memories passed through her mind. Long restaurant shifts, empty nights practicing after closing, the first hesitant note played in silence, the unexpected applause that changed everything. She reminded herself why she started again. Not for recognition, not for success, but because playing made her feel alive. When her turn finally came, the host introduced her simply. No dramatic titles, no exaggerated praise. Just an honest introduction of someone whose journey began in an ordinary place. She walked onto the stage. The applause welcoming her felt warm but gentle. She sat at the piano bench, adjusting her position slowly while taking a deep breath. The hall grew quiet. Under the soft spotlight, the world outside seemed to disappear. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their familiar cool surface. For one brief second, fear whispered again. Then she began to play. The first melody flowed calmly, steady and sincere. Unlike earlier performances filled with nervous energy, this one carried acceptance. She no longer tried proving anything. She simply told her story through music. Each note reflected pieces of her journey. Struggle, patience, rediscovery, and hope. The audience listened without movement, completely absorbed. As the performance continued, confidence grew naturally. Her hands moved freely, guided by emotion rather than worry. Time seemed to slow. She remembered evenings when she believed her dreams had ended forever. She remembered standing beside the restaurant piano, afraid even to touch it. Now she sat before hundreds of listeners, sharing the same passion she once hid from the world. The final melody rose gently before fading into silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then applause filled the hall, strong, heartfelt, lasting longer than she expected. Some people stood. Others wiped tears quietly. She looked out at the audience, overwhelmed not by attention, but by connection. Music had reached them, and somehow she had reached herself again. After the performance, many people approached her with kind words. Some shared personal stories about abandoned dreams they wanted to revisit. Others thanked her for reminding them that change was still possible, even later in life. She listened carefully to each person. Every conversation felt meaningful because she understood their emotions deeply. She had once stood exactly where they were, uncertain, afraid, convinced opportunities had passed. Later that night, as the venue emptied, she sat alone at the piano once more. The quiet felt familiar, similar to those late nights in the restaurant after closing. Except everything had changed. Her journey did not magically erase challenges. She still faced decisions, responsibilities, and hard work ahead. Success required consistency, learning, and patience. But something important was different now. She trusted herself. In the following months, opportunities continued growing steadily. She performed at cultural events, small concerts, and community programs. Each experience expanded her confidence while keeping her grounded. Despite new recognition, she never forgot where everything began. One evening, she returned to the restaurant that had unknowingly changed her life. The staff welcomed her warmly, proud of her progress. The old piano still stood in its corner, polished and cared for. She sat down and played again, not as an employee helping during an emergency, but as someone grateful for the moment that started it all. Customers paused just as they had that first night. The difference now was not skill but belief. After finishing, she thanked the manager quietly before leaving. Walking outside, she realized how far she had come without ever planning it. Transformation had not arrived through luck alone. It came through courage during small moments, saying yes when fear suggested no, trying again after years of silence, trusting passion despite uncertainty. Her life no longer felt trapped in repetition. She still lived simply, still valued ordinary days, but purpose now guided her choices. Music became part of daily life again, not as a lost dream but as reality. Sometimes she thought about the version of herself who once walked past music shop windows without entering. She wished she could tell that person something important, that it was never too late, that forgotten dreams can wait patiently, and that one unexpected evening can quietly change the direction of an entire life. On another night, standing before a new audience, she placed her hands on the piano once again. The lights dimmed, conversations faded, and anticipation filled the room. Before playing, she smiled softly, because she understood now, transformation does not happen when life becomes perfect. It happens when someone finally listens to the voice inside them that refuses to disappear. The music began. And this time, she played not to escape her life, but to celebrate it.